Hello, this is Nora. I'm the executive manager of WSA. I hope you all enjoyed the networking as much as I did. I actually met quite a lot of new people that I did not meet before. That's the purpose of this event, Connect for Impact. Very important for that is telling stories, giving a platform for people to share their stories, to share knowledge. And there could not be a better person to talk about that than Ahmed Badr, whom we invited first because he is a UN young leader for the UN SDGs, but also a very inspiring person who is all about storytelling and using culture and stories to overcome trauma, to connect people, and to provide a platform for young people. But I believe, Ahmed, you can introduce yourself much better than I do. And sorry for my weird picture. I need to put my microphone in front of my mouth because the technicians told me otherwise no one can hear me. Ahmed.
Thank you so much, Nora, for having me and for this wonderful, wonderful conference. I've been keeping up with the program and it's really, really remarkable. Just an amazing, amazing set of speakers that I'm honored to join. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm an author, social entrepreneur, and a former refugee from Iraq. I'm the founder of Narratio, which works with displaced young people around the world and young people in general, and really actively creating spaces for them to share their stories on their own terms, doing that through multimedia and with partnering with organizations like Christie's, the UN, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, really actively creating fellowship programs, publishing opportunities and publishing platforms, workshops, partnerships, all in service of this idea of telling your own story on your own terms as a displaced young person or as a young person in general. This is something that's very close to home. My family was displaced when I was very young. And we were resettled as refugees to the United States in 2008. And so, displacement is very close to home, but I'm really on a mission to create spaces where displaced young people can share stories that transcend their displacement, stories that are about the fullest extent of what they want to express. And so, yeah, that's a quick introduction.
So you mentioned you have been displaced yourself. So where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Iraq. My family was displaced to Syria, and then from Syria we were resettled to the US back in 2008.
And how, talking a bit more personal, because we will go on the meta level in a bit, but talking about you personally, did storytelling or telling stories, what did it mean for yourself, for you personally?
Yeah, well, first, I didn't realize I even had a story to tell. In the beginning of my second year of high school, a family friend kind of just suggested, he said, why don't you start writing about your family story and expressing it? And I didn't really think that we had a story to tell. I didn't really think that I even, not just having a story to tell, but even the ability to express it and the kind of the courage to express it. But I thought, okay, well, why not just try it and put pen to paper? And from there, I started to realize that storytelling was helping me understand myself and my place in this new country. As an Iraqi American Muslim refugee, I was had all these identities I was in the middle of, but wasn't sure how to exactly exist within all of them or to claim all of them. And through storytelling and through sharing our own story and kind of expressing the tensions between these identities, the places where they match perfectly and the places they didn't, other people were interested in that process and in that expression. And so that was actually the beginning of it all, realizing that storytelling can give you agency over your own story, not just your own story, but your own understanding of your place in the world. And that was transformative, because then it was like, okay, well, why not make that available to other young people around the world? And that's how Narratio was born.
And you mentioned already you're working cross media. I found it very interesting that, as far as I know, Narratio is a digital platform, but you also use a podcast now, and you recently also published your first book. I think it's pretty clear, especially now during COVID, how important digital tools are to stay in touch. But also, what is a bit your experience? Is the media helping to tell the story? What comes with the different media? Like, what is the different how is it different to tell a story through narration, through the book, obviously very different, or through a podcast, and how are you kind of using and leveraging those tools to tell stories?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So I think there are two parts of it. First, there's genre, right? The genre aspect of things, and there's the digital, the online versus the offline. So with the book was kind of a culminating work of everything that we've done. So it's art, poetry, and stories from displaced young people around the world that I had the honor of working with and doing workshops with in Greece, in Trinidad and Tobago, and across the U.S., but mainly in upstate New York, with resettled refugees there. You have multiple mediums first, right? So if you have poetry, if you have photography, if you have storytelling, you're meeting someone and you're working with them in a way that is accessible. So they're coming in and saying, okay, well, maybe I'm not a poet, maybe I'm not a writer, but I'm an artist. So I'll draw something or I'll create something visual. So that's one piece of it, is it makes things accessible, that this multimedia aspect of things where you just make it accessible in different ways. Narratio started and will always be, and will always have a digital component, but it started as just an online platform where young people can publish their work. So that accessibility to publishing was something that's at the center of our mission, has always been at the center of our mission. So that's something that was always there from the very beginning. But now through the workshops, which are in person and now obviously virtual, through our fellowship program, which was in person, and now we have kind of a hybrid model going, hoping to return to in person, when it's safe enough in the next few months, hopefully, fingers crossed. But the idea is to create multimedia that also transcends genre, that then is presented to a young person where they can just choose whatever feels most comfortable and then introduce their work to the world. So I think the power of digital is that it's accessible, and the power of having multiple genres is that it expands that accessibility in a way that's really incredibly powerful.
We only have a few more minutes, but I have 3 more questions. So I would ask you for quite short answers, because I'm very curious about 2 different things. First is, you are a ambassador for the United Nations. The United Nations is very close to WSA. We have been initiated in the framework of the UN. The UN SDGs are kind of our scope for action, but it also seems far away, bureaucratic, hard to access. How is it for you kind of working with the United Nations, and why should this, I don't know, for some people like a fantasy bureaucratic building organization, why is it relevant? And can you somehow, being like on both worlds, tell us what the connections can be? And probably also the second question would be more about telling stories is all about content, and telling your story is very much about language. And what is your experience with this language part? Does it have to be in local content and local language to really, that you can then share your story, which is then obviously harder to make it accessible for everyone online?
Absolutely. So I had the honor to work with the UN Youth Envoy's Office as a UN Young Leader, and as well as UNHCR as a high-profile supporter. And the SDGs are very, very close to my work. And the challenge obviously is always, how do you translate the SDGs and make them accessible? Accessibility, again, is the huge theme throughout my work and my team's work. And it all comes down to, again, the story of the SDGs. How do you make them relevant? How do you make them just accessible? Again, that word accessible. And I think it comes down to this idea that everything we do, there's an SDG goal attached to it, that there's an intersectional nature to all of the SDGs. And this is something that that was stressed upon all of the UN Young Leaders from the very beginning, is that you're 17 people, but you're not 17 that each has one goal that they're working on. You're all working on so many at the same time, and this intersectionality is so important to note and to work within and to acknowledge, because it makes your work better. At the end of the day, it makes your work much more thoughtful, much more engaged, and just much more accessible at the end of the day. So that's a key piece of it. And to the second part of your question, I think that stories have to be effective to reach people, right? And in my experience, the way you do that is by making that story personal, personal in a way that still, can be accessible to other people, but is informed by your own personal experience and your own authentic voice. This phrase, telling your own story on your own terms, is at the heart of what Narratio does for a reason. And it's because we believe that personal storytelling and personal agency are closely intertwined. And when we're able to tell our personal story in a way that's authentic and powerful to us, then the world will listen, and avenues will open for the world to listen. So that's a key piece of it that I think can be carried through the SDGs and beyond.
So this brings us right to the heart of the WSA. It's the 45 winners, it's their pitches, it's all entrepreneurs who solve or to tackle one of the UN SDGs. And I guess somehow they also have to tell the story. So do you have any, you are also a social entrepreneur yourself, you're a storyteller, you're an artist, you are the UN ambassador. Are there any things where you have the feeling, these are my top 2 tips for the upcoming pitches for those entrepreneurs who have a story to tell? Anything you want to share with them before we go right into the first batch of pitches, which is also very close to your work because it's the category of culture and tourism?
Absolutely, which is all so incredibly exciting. I think, the winners are very well equipped for the pitches, but if I can humbly add 2 things, I think, again, first, make it personal, and second, make it self-aware. I think those 2 things together are so powerful when you deliver something so authentic and so engaged, but you're aware of the context that you're pitching in, you're aware of the context that your work is working within. And so having that personal touch and that personal touch of self-awareness, I think, is really incredibly powerful. But I think everyone is in good shape, and I wish them the very best of luck.
Thank you so much. I think one of the most important things that you pointed out in the very beginning, when you said someone invited you to tell your story and you thought, actually, why should anyone be interested and how should I share it, and why? I think it's the same story for a lot of social entrepreneurs. A lot of times they feel very lonely. They have the feeling that actually no one is listening to them. But I think that what you really prove is that stories can really make a positive impact. That stories and telling stories and connecting to tell stories can change the world and the perception, empathy, solidarity. So thank you so much, Ahmed, for this fantastic opening and inspiration.